My spine ached against the too-tight yellow dress 4 hours into my shift, and the backless design felt less like fashion and more like exposure. Every step in these stilettos sent shockwaves through my calves, but I kept my chin up and my smile empty. This was camouflage. 4 months in this city. 4 months answering to Sienna. 4 months praying the wrong pair of eyes wouldn't recognize the cellist from the courthouse scandal. The Golden Era lounge sprawled around me like a gilded cage. Art Deco fixtures dripped from 20-foot ceilings, casting amber shadows across polished onyx floors. The air tasted rich, leather and tobacco leaf, aged bourbon, and something darker, something that smelled like consequences. This wasn't just a lounge. It was a cathedral for men who bought silence with $100 bills. Sienna, Kara hissed as she brushed past, her own tight dress creased from the Friday night rush, mascara smudged beneath one eye. Whiskey neat to table 6. And brace yourself, VIP sections at capacity. Raphael's been barking orders all night. The VIP section. My stomach turned to ice. That crimson velvet corner sectioned off by black ropes and watched by men whose tailored suits couldn't quite hide the gun-shaped bulges at their ribs. I'd made it 4 months without stepping past that threshold. Tonight, apparently, my luck had run out. Welcome back to the channel before Thelma steps into the lion's den. I need to know. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. And if you're ready for a story where one whispered word changes everything, hit that like button and subscribe. Let's dive in. Sienna. Raphael's bark cut through the lounge's ambient jazz. I turned to face him, slicked hair, dead eyes, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. His stress was a living thing. Table 6, then you're covering VIP. Natalie walked out mid-shift. VIP? My voice came out thinner than I wanted. But you'll figure it out. His hand clamped on my shoulder, fingers pressing against bone with barely restrained violence. Listen very carefully. The men in VIP are not customers. They're patrons. You don't chat. You don't linger. You don't look too long at their faces. You serve, you smile, you disappear. Comprends? I swallowed against the dryness in my throat. Nodded. Good. He released me with a shove that nearly made me stumble. Now move. I delivered the whiskey to table 6 on autopilot, my hand somehow steady even as my pulse hammered in my ears. The floor manager forces workers into danger without a second thought. If you can't stand bosses who exploit their employees' safety for profit, you know what to do. Only the heartless would scroll past this kind of injustice. But I couldn't afford to think about fairness or Raphael's cruelty. I could only afford to survive. When I turned toward the VIP section, the velvet rope seemed to pulse with warning. The guard, a man built like a walking wall, unhooked it without a word, his eyes sliding over me with the kind of assessment that made my skin crawl. I stepped through. The lighting changed immediately. Softer here, more intimate. The kind of dimness that hid expressions and encouraged secrets. Red leather booths lined the walls, each occupied by men in custom suits that cost more than my yearly rent. They barely glanced at me as I passed. I was furniture to them, decoration, except for table 1. It sat at the center of the VIP section like a throne at the heart of a kingdom circular, elevated by a single step, flanked by 2 guards who stood with their hands folded and their eyes everywhere. And at that table, sprawled with the casual confidence of someone who'd never had to ask for anything twice, was him, Aldino Soto. I knew the name the way, a distant storm, through whispers, through warnings, through the way people's voices dropped when they said it. Cartel, kingpin, untouchable. The kind of man who owned politicians and buried mistakes in the desert. But knowing the name hadn't prepared me for the reality of him. He wore a white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his forearms, the fabric so crisp it practically glowed against his tan skin. But it was the ink that drew my eyes, dark, intricate tattoos that crawled up from his chest, winding around his throat like they were choking him slowly, deliberately. A serpent coiled around a rose, thorns and scripture. Something in Latin I couldn't read from this distance. His hair was slicked back perfectly, not a strand out of place, and his jaw was carved from stone, sharp, unforgiving, the kind of face that belonged on Renaissance paintings of fallen angels. He held a glass of amber liquid loosely in one hand, his fingers long and scarred, a heavy gold ring catching the light. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Dark, unflinching, patient. They found me the second I crossed into his line of sight, tracking me with the precision of a predator who'd already calculated every exit and determined none of them mattered. He didn't smile, didn't shift, just watched as I approached, the weight of his attention pressing against my ribs like a hand. One of the guards stepped forward. "The whiskey," he said flatly. "Top shelf, 2 glasses." I nodded, retreating to the bar on legs that didn't quite feel like my own. My hands shook as I poured Macallan 25, the bottle heavy and cold, the liquid gold as it caught the light. I arranged the glasses on a tray with a precision born from desperation. Don't spill, don't stumble, don't give him a reason to look closer. When I returned to table 1, the guards parted. I climbed the single step, my heels clicking too loud against the marble, and set the tray down with a control that felt like a minor miracle. "Your whiskey, sir," I murmured, keeping my eyes on the glasses as I poured. "Look at me." His voice was low, textured like smoke and gravel, and it slid under my skin before I could stop it. I froze. Every instinct screamed to obey Raphael's rules. Don't look, don't linger, disappear. But disobeying Aldino Soto felt infinitely more dangerous. I lifted my eyes. He was leaning back in his seat, one arm draped over the booth. His gaze locked on my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. Up close, the tattoos were even more intricate, a saint's face on one side of his throat, a demon on the other, both watching me with empty eyes. His jaw ticked once, the only movement in an otherwise still frame. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sienna." The lie came automatically. His eyes narrowed slightly, just enough to let me know he'd caught it. "Sienna," he repeated, tasting the name like he was deciding whether to spit it out or swallow it. "You're new." "4 months, sir." He picked up his glass, swirling the whiskey once before taking a slow sip, never looking away from me. "You're afraid." It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. "Good," he said quietly, setting the glass down with a soft clink. "Fear keeps you alive in a place like this." One of the other men at the table laughed a sharp, ugly sound, but Aldino didn't react. He just kept watching me, his eyes moving over my face like he was memorizing it, cataloging every flicker of panic I couldn't quite hide. "That dress," he said after a long moment. "Yellow." I glanced down at myself, confused. "Yes, sir, it suits you." His mouth curved not quite a smile, but close. Something darker, like a canary in a coal mine. The word settled over me like a threat. I didn't know if he meant I was beautiful or doomed, and I wasn't sure which would be worse. My fingers tightened on the empty tray. "Will there be anything else, sir?" "No." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on the table, his eyes still locked on mine. "But I'll see you again, Sienna." It sounded like a promise. It felt like a sentencing. I nodded once, stepped back, and fled. I survived the rest of my shift by becoming invisible. I served drinks with mechanical precision, avoided eye contact, and didn't return to table 1 even when one of the guards gestured for another round. I sent Kara instead. She came back pale, whispering that the man with the tattoos had asked where the girl in yellow went, but Raphael had intervened, sending someone else. By midnight, my feet were numb and my face ached from the fake smile I'd worn like armor. The Friday crowd had thinned to a dedicated core of drinkers who'd be here until dawn. Men who paid for the privilege of watching the sun rise through their whiskey glass. The VIP section remained full, shadows and cigar smoke and the low rumble of Spanish drifting through the velvet barrier. I was refilling water glasses at table 9 when Raphael appeared at my elbow. "VIP needs bottle service. Table 1, you're up." My hand stilled on the pitcher. "Raphael, please send Kara, or..." He asked for you specifically. Raphael's voice dropped to a hiss. "The girl in yellow. Don't make me repeat myself." The water pitcher trembled in my grip. I set it down carefully before I could spill it, before my shaking hands could betray just how badly I wanted to run. But running would draw attention. Questions. And questions were the last thing a ghost could afford. I nodded. The bottle they gave me was older than I was, cognac from a year I couldn't pronounce, the label gilded and foreign. I carried it on a silver tray with 2 fresh glasses, my heels clicking against marble like a countdown. The VIP guard unhooked the rope without a word. I stepped through. Table 1 looked different now, emptier. The other men had dispersed to different corners of the section, leaving only Aldino and his 2 guards. He sat in the same position as before, sprawled like a king. White shirt somehow still pristine, tattoos dark against his throat, but his glass was empty, and his eyes tracked me the moment I entered his line of sight. I climbed the single step, set the tray down, began to pour. My hands were steadier now. Muscle memory from a different life, pouring wine at gallery openings, champagne at fundraisers. Back when I was Thelma Emmett, and my biggest fear was a missed note during a performance. I tilted the bottle with practiced grace, watching the amber liquid catch the low light. And then the music changed. It had been ambient all night, smooth jazz, the kind designed to fade into expensive conversation. But now, drifting from somewhere deeper in the lounge, I heard it. A Spanish guitar, slow, melancholic, the kind of melody that reached inside your chest and squeezed. My hand stuttered. Just for a second, but it was enough. I was back in Barcelona, 19 years old, playing in a cathedral that smelled like incense and stone. The guitarist had been old, his fingers gnarled but impossibly nimble, and he'd played between movements while I caught my breath. He'd called me mi corazon. When I thanked him afterward, my heart, and I'd carried that phrase like a talisman ever since. The memory crashed over me so hard I forgot where I was. Forgot the yellow dress, the false name, the man watching me with eyes that missed nothing. I poured the second glass, leaned in slightly to set it in front of him, and whispered, mi corazon. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, soft, reflexive, aimed at no one, a ghost of a better time. The air changed instantly. Both guards went rigid, hands moving inside their jackets. Aldino's glass, halfway to his lips, stopped. Silence flooded the table like a living thing, pressing against my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat. I froze, the bottle still in my hand. My eyes locked on the table because I wouldn't look up. Oh God. What had I just said? What did you call me? Aldino's voice was soft, too soft, the kind of quiet that came before violence. My throat closed. I tried to speak, to apologize, to explain it wasn't meant for him, but nothing came out. The guitar music swelled in the background, mocking me, and then his hand moved. He reached across the table, slow, deliberate, and his fingers wrapped around my wrist. Not bruising, but firm, inescapable. He pulled me forward until I had no choice but to meet his eyes. They were darker up close, endless, the kind of eyes that had seen terrible things and done worse. I asked you a question, he said, his voice dropping lower, his thumb pressing against the pulse point in my wrist. What did you call me? My voice cracked. I didn't mean it wasn't. You called me mi corazon. He said it slowly, letting each syllable hang in the air between us. My heart. One of the guards shifted, muttering something sharp in Spanish. Aldino raised his free hand, a single gesture, and the man fell silent. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words tumbling out too fast. I wasn't thinking. The music, it reminded me of I didn't mean you, I swear. It just slipped out and... Stop. His grip on my wrist tightened fractionally. Breathe. I tried. Failed. My lungs felt like they'd forgotten how. Aldino leaned forward, his face inches from mine now. Close enough that I could smell him sandalwood and smoke and something sharper, like gunmetal. His tattooed throat moved as he swallowed, the serpent's coils flexing. Say it again, he murmured. I blinked. What? Say it again. His eyes burned into mine, dark and infinite and hungry, but slower. My heart stopped. This was a test. It had to be. Some kind of twisted game men like him played before they decided whether you lived or disappeared. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to pull away, to run. But his hand on my wrist was an anchor. And his eyes, God help me, his eyes looked almost vulnerable. Mi corazon, I whispered. His jaw tightened. The muscle ticked once, twice. His thumb traced a slow circle against my pulse, and I realized with mounting horror that he could feel how fast my heart was racing. Again, he said, his voice rougher now. I can't. Again. Something in his tone, command, and plea tangled together made my breath catch. I didn't understand what was happening. Didn't understand why he wasn't angry. Why his guards hadn't dragged me away. Why he was looking at me like I'd just spoken some kind of sacred text. Mi corazon. I breathed. He closed his eyes. Just for a second. When they opened again, something had shifted in them, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man beneath the monster. Do you know what you just did? He asked quietly. I shook my head, terrified. You made me want something I can't have. His grip on my wrist loosened, his fingers sliding down to ghost across my palm. And I always get what I want, Sienna. He released me. I stumbled back, the tray forgotten, my wrist burning where he'd touched me. The guards watched me like wolves watching a rabbit decide whether to run. Get out, Aldino said, his voice empty now, controlled, before I changed my mind. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and fled, my heels clicking frantically against marble, the Spanish guitar following me like a curse as I crashed through the velvet rope and into the main lounge. Raphael shouted something, but I didn't stop. I grabbed my coat from the back room, ignored Kara's startled questions, and burst through the side exit into the cold night air. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I needed to leave. Tonight. This city. This name. This life. Because Aldino Soto had just looked at me like I mattered, and men like him didn't let things that mattered walk away. Before we continue with what happens next, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever had a moment where one wrong word changed everything, drop a comment right now. And if you believe no one should live in fear because of one mistake, hit that subscribe button. Because what's about to happen to Thelma will prove that some mistakes are destiny in disguise. The November air hit my face like a slap. Cold enough to sting, but not cold enough to numb the panic clawing up my throat. I ran 3 blocks before my lungs screamed for mercy, my heels clicking against wet pavement like gunshots in the empty streets. Only when I reached the bus stop did I finally stop, gasping, my hands braced against my knees. What had I done? Mi corazon. I'd called a cartel kingpin my heart like some lovesick fool, and he'd made me say it again. 3 times. His fingers on my wrist, his eyes burning into mine like he was memorizing my face for a file that would end up in a morgue drawer. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands, pulling up the bus schedule. The next one wouldn't arrive for 12 minutes. 12 minutes standing under a flickering streetlight, exposed, while men with guns and orders searched for the girl in the yellow dress who dared to speak to their boss like he was human. A car turned onto the street black, expensive, windows tinted, and my heart stopped. I didn't wait to see if it slowed down. I ran again, cutting through an alley that smelled like garbage and something worse, my heels catching on cracked asphalt. The yellow dress was a beacon, screaming my location to anyone looking. I should have brought a jacket, should have thought ahead. But all I could think about was his voice say it again, but slower, and the way his thumb had traced my pulse like he was counting down to something inevitable. My apartment was 4 miles from the lounge. I'd chosen it specifically for the distance, for the anonymity of a neighborhood where no one asked questions and the landlord accepted cash. It took me 40 minutes on foot, my shoes abandoned 3 blocks in, my bare feet freezing against concrete. By the time I reached the building, my dress was torn at the hem, and my carefully constructed composure had shattered into something feral. I took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the flicker of the broken hallway light, and shoved my key into the lock with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The door swung open. I slammed it behind me, threw the deadbolt, and collapsed against the wood. Silence. Just my breathing. Just the hammer of my pulse in my ears. My apartment wasn't much a studio, with water-stained walls, a mattress on the floor, a hot plate I'd bought at a thrift store. No pictures on the walls. No personal items visible. Everything I owned fit into 2 duffel bags that lived packed under the bed, ready for this exact moment, because I'd always known I'd have to run again. I just hadn't expected it to be tonight. I peeled off the yellow dress, letting it pool at my feet like a crime scene. My wrists still burned where Aldino had touched me, like his fingerprints had left marks I couldn't see. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, thick socks, the most anonymous clothes I owned. Then I dragged the duffel bags out and started checking their contents. Cash. $4,000 in small bills, rubber-banded and vacuum-sealed. Fake IDs. 3 of them, all with different names, all with my face. Burner phone, still in its packaging. A change of clothes. Toiletries. A pocket knife. Everything I needed to disappear. I was zipping the second bag when my real phone buzzed on the counter. My whole body went cold. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. It could be a spam call, a wrong number. It could be anything except what I knew. With bone-deep certainty, it actually was. The phone buzzed again. A text this time. I picked it up with numb fingers. You left your coat. 3 words. No signature. No threat. But I knew that coat, the cheap black jacket I'd grabbed from the back room at the lounge. And I knew, with the same sick certainty, that only one person would bother to text me about it. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. How did he get my number? Raphael. It had to be Raphael. The employee files, the emergency contact information I'd been required to fill out. Aldino had probably walked into that back office, demanded my information, and Raphael had handed it over without a second thought because men like Aldino didn't hear the word no. Another text arrived. You run well in heels. Impressive. He'd watched me leave. Or had someone watch me. Which meant he knew which direction I'd gone, which streets I'd taken, possibly even which building I'd entered. I had to leave. Now, I grabbed the duffel bags, my real phone, the burner still in its package, shoved my feet into sneakers, did a final sweep of the apartment, making sure I'd left nothing behind that could be traced, no thread that could unravel back to Thelma Emmett. The phone buzzed a third time. "Don't run. We need to talk." My laugh came out sharp and bitter. Talk. Like I was stupid enough to sit down for a conversation with a man who probably had bodies buried under his estate. Like I hadn't spent 4 months running from one monster only to stumble directly into the path of another. I typed back with shaking fingers. Wrong number. Deleted the message. Turned off the phone. Then I opened the window that faced the fire escape and climbed out into the night. The metal stairs were icy under my hands, the drop to the alley below making my stomach lurch. But I'd practiced this route a dozen times, and the 4 months I'd lived here knew which steps groaned, which bolts were loose, which path would take me to the opposite street without being seen from the front entrance. I made it to the ground and ran. I had $300 in my pocket, and a bus station 6 blocks away. The midnight Greyhound to Phoenix left in 40 minutes. From Phoenix, I could catch another bus to Albuquerque, then Denver, then anywhere that wasn't here. I could become someone new again. Thelma has to leave everything behind because of one mistake. 4 months of stability, a job that paid cash, the first apartment she'd felt safe in since Detective Vance destroyed her life. If you believe people deserve a second chance and shouldn't live in fear, comment, "Everyone deserves peace." Trolls who love chaos won't care, but I know you're better than that. The bus station glowed like a fluorescent cathedral when I finally reached it, my lungs burning, my feet numb. I pushed through the double doors and joined the line at the ticket counter, keeping my head down, my duffel bags clutched close. The woman behind the glass barely looked at me. "Where to?" "Phoenix, midnight bus." She printed the ticket without comment. I paid in cash, crumpled 20s that I'd been saving for exactly this. She slid the ticket across the counter. "Gate 7. Boards in 30 minutes. I nodded and turned toward the waiting area, already mentally rehearsing my new identity. A name I'd never used, a story I'd never told. And then I saw him. He was leaning against the far wall near Gate 7, arms crossed, white shirt traded for a black jacket that made him look like a shadow given form. The tattoos on his neck were still visible above the collar, the serpent's head peeking out like a warning. Aldino Soto, waiting. His eyes found mine across the crowded terminal, and even from this distance, I could see the question in them. "Did you really think you could run from me?" My ticket crumpled in my fist, and I realized, with a terror that tasted like copper, that I'd made a terrible miscalculation. Men like Aldino Soto didn't chase. They simply waited at the finish line. Thelma has to leave everything behind because of one mistake. If you believe people deserve a second chance and shouldn't live in fear, comment, "Everyone deserves peace." Trolls who love chaos won't care. I didn't get on the bus to Phoenix. The moment our eyes met across that terminal, I knew the midnight Greyhound was a fantasy. He'd found my apartment. He'd found the bus station. If I boarded that bus, he'd simply meet me at the next stop, or the one after that, patient as death. So I did the only thing that made sense in a world that had stopped following logic. I walked out the side exit and disappeared into the maze of streets that bordered the industrial district, where the glow of the bus station faded into something darker, something that smelled like diesel and desperation. The Starlight Motel squatted between a closed auto shop and a bar with broken neon, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't require ID if you paid cash up front. $40 bought me a room key and the desk clerk's complete disinterest in my existence. Room 12 was exactly what $40 promised. Water-stained ceiling, a bed that sagged in the middle, a bathroom with rust rings in the toilet, and a lock that didn't quite catch. The single window overlooked the parking lot, its view obscured by a curtain that might have been white in another lifetime. I dropped my duffel bags on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. They were still shaking. How had he known? The bus station was a guess, a good guess, but still a guess. Unless he'd had people watching the terminal all night. Unless he had eyes everywhere in this city. A network of informants and cameras and whispered reports that funneled back to him like tributaries to a river. I should keep moving. Wait until dawn, then catch a cab to a different station. Buy a ticket to somewhere random. Become invisible again. But God, I was so tired. 4 months of looking over my shoulder. 4 months of sleeping in clothes, keeping my shoes by the bed, memorizing every exit. And before that, 6 months running from Detective Vance. Almost a year of my life spent as a ghost, haunting the edges of cities that would never feel like home. I lay back on the questionable mattress and closed my eyes. Just for a minute. The knock came 2 hours later. 3 sharp raps against hollow wood, loud enough to jolt me awake but controlled enough to avoid drawing attention from neighboring rooms. I sat up, my heart already racing, my hand reaching automatically for the knife in my bag. "Sienna." His voice came through the door, low and patient. "Open the door." I didn't move, didn't breathe. "I know you're in there. I can hear your breathing through the walls." A pause. "And we both know that lock won't keep me out if I want in." He was right. The door was particle board and regret. A strong kick would splinter it. I stood slowly, every muscle in my body coiled tight. "Go away." "No." I'll scream. "No, you won't." There was something almost amused in his tone. "Because screaming draws attention, and attention is the last thing you want. Now open the door before I do it for you." My hand hovered over the deadbolt. Every instinct screamed at me to run through the bathroom window, into the parking lot, anywhere but here. But he'd already proven he could track me across a city. What made me think I'd get farther than the street? I unlocked the door. It swung open before I could touch the handle, and suddenly Aldino Soto was filling the doorway, broad shoulders blocking out the parking lot lights, his presence pressing into the small room like water into a sinking ship. He was still wearing the black jacket from the bus station, but up close I could see the details. Custom-tailored, probably worth more than 6 months of my rent. His hair was slightly mussed now, like he'd run his hand through it too many times. His eyes swept the room in one efficient glance, the sagging bed, the duffel bags, the water stains, the rust, and something dangerous flickered across his face. "This is where you've been living?" I lifted my chin. "No. This is where I'm hiding from you. Before this." He stepped inside without invitation, forcing me to back up. The door clicked shut behind him. "Your apartment. Was it like this?" "It was fine. Define fine. It had working locks and heat. That's more than some people get." His jaw tightened, that telltale muscle ticking. "Show me your hands." "What?" "Your hands, Sienna." "Show me." I didn't know why I obeyed. Maybe because he'd said it like a command and a plea at the same time. His voice rough in a way that made my stomach twist. I held out my hands, palms up. He took them carefully, his fingers warm against my cold skin, and turned them over with a gentleness that felt obscene coming from a man I'd watched make his guards go rigid with a single gesture. His thumb traced the calluses on my fingertips, years of cello strings, permanently etched into my skin. "Musician," he said quietly. Not a question. I tried to pull away. He held firm. "And you're working as a cocktail waitress in a place where men look at you like meat." His eyes lifted to mine, dark and burning. "Why?" "Because musicians don't make $40 in tips per night. That's not why you're hiding." He released one hand but kept the other, his grip loose enough that I could escape if I wanted to. I didn't want to. "Tell me who you're running from." "I don't." "The truth, Sienna. Or whatever your real name is." He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. "Because no one runs this hard unless the thing chasing them is worse than what they're running toward." My throat closed. I couldn't tell him. Couldn't explain that I was running from a decorated police detective who'd decided I belonged to him, who'd manufactured evidence to trap me, who had the entire justice system on his side. "I can't tell you," I whispered. "Can't or won't. Does it matter?" "Yes." His free hand came up, fingers brushing my jaw with a touch so light it felt like a question. "Because I'm about to offer you something, and I need to know if you're capable of accepting it." I should have been terrified. Should have been calculating escape routes and survival odds. Instead, all I could focus on was the warmth of his hand against my face and the way he was looking at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve, even if it took him years. "What are you offering?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Protection. Absolute. Unconditional." He said it like a vow. 1 month. "You work for me legitimately, managing my art gallery, and in exchange, no one touches you. No one finds you. No one even knows you exist unless you want them to." "Why would you do that?" His thumb traced my cheekbone. "Because you called me mi corazon like you meant it, and no one has spoken to me like I'm human in 5 years." The confession hung between us, raw and unexpected. "And because," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "you're living in places like this when you should be playing music in concert halls. That's not survival, Sienna. That's slow death. And I don't let beautiful things die if I can prevent it. Thelma has to choose keep running until there's nothing left of her, or trust a monster who's offering her the one thing she hasn't had in a year, Safety. If you believe people deserve a second chance and shouldn't live in fear, comment, everyone deserves peace. Trolls who love chaos won't care, but I know you understand what it means to need help from unexpected places. I looked at his face, the sharp jaw, the tattoos that marked him as dangerous, the eyes that saw too much. He was everything I should fear. A criminal, a killer, probably. A man whose protection came with a price I couldn't begin to calculate. But he was also standing in a $40 motel room looking at me like I mattered. And Detective Vance had been a decorated officer who'd nearly destroyed my life. 1 month, I heard myself say. His eyes flashed with something that might have been triumph or relief. 1 month, and then you decide if you want to stay. His hand fell away from my face, but his fingers remained tangled with mine. Or if you want to keep running. I should have negotiated. Should have demanded details, contracts, guarantees. Instead, I whispered, okay. And just like that, I stopped running. Aldino's car was parked 3 spaces from my motel room door. A black Mercedes with tinted windows and lines so clean they looked like they'd been carved from obsidian. One of his men stood beside it, the same guard from table 1, his hand resting casually near his jacket in a way that suggested nothing about this moment was casual. That's Marco, Aldino said, following my gaze. He'll be with us. Diego is driving. How many men do you travel with? Enough. He picked up both my duffel bags before I could protest, slinging them over one shoulder like they weighed nothing. You'll meet the others at the estate. Estate. The word sat heavy in my chest. Marco opened the rear door without a word, his eyes scanning the parking lot with mechanical precision. Aldino gestured for me to enter first. I hesitated at the threshold, staring into the leather interior that probably cost more than everything I'd owned in the last year combined. Second thoughts? Aldino's voice held no judgment, just curiosity. I don't know anything about you, I said quietly. Not really. You know I keep my word. He met my eyes over the car roof. And you know, I could have hurt you a dozen times by now, if that was my intention. He was right. He'd tracked me across the city, cornered me in a motel room, and the worst thing he'd done was touch my face like it was made of porcelain. I got in the car. The door closed with the kind of solid thunk that spoke of engineering and money. Aldino slid in beside me, close enough that his jacket brushed my arm, far enough that I didn't feel trapped. Marco took the passenger seat. Diego, an older man with silver at his temples and hands that looked like they'd broken things professionally, started the engine without greeting. We pulled out of the Starlight Motel's parking lot, and I watched through the rear window as that water-stained room disappeared into the industrial darkness. No going back now. The drive took 40 minutes, each mile pulling us further from the city center and deeper into the kind of neighborhood where the houses had gates and the streetlights were decorative rather than functional. Diego navigated turns with the ease of someone who'd driven this route 1,000 times, while Marco remained silent, occasionally checking his phone. Aldino didn't try to fill the silence. He sat with one arm draped across the seat back, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him and watch the city roll past with the expression of a man conducting inventory. The gallery, I finally said, because the quiet was starting to press against my ribs. What kind of art? Contemporary, some classical. We focus on emerging Latin American artists, painters, sculptors, photographers who can't get gallery space in the major houses. He glanced at me. You'll have full control of acquisitions and exhibitions. I don't interfere with the art. Just everything else? His mouth curved slightly. Just everything else. The gates appeared around a curve, 12 feet of wrought iron topped with security cameras, flanked by stone walls that disappeared into perfectly manicured darkness. Diego slowed, pressed something on the dash, and the gates swung open with silent hydraulics. The estate beyond looked like something ripped from a magazine about people I'd never be. The main house was Spanish colonial, all white stucco and terracotta tiles, 3 stories of arched windows glowing gold against the night. Floodlights illuminated gardens that probably required a full-time staff, and a fountain, an actual fountain, burbled somewhere in the darkness. This is where you live? My voice came out smaller than I intended. This is where we live, Aldino corrected. For the next month, the car stopped beneath a portico, and immediately 2 more men appeared younger than Marco, both dressed in dark suits that screamed security rather than service. One opened Aldino's door, the other mine. I stepped out onto pavers that were probably imported from somewhere with a name I couldn't pronounce. Boss. The younger guard nodded at Aldino with something that looked like actual respect, not the fear-edged deference I'd seen in Raphael's eyes at the lounge. Everything's secure. Rosa left dinner in the warmer. Thank you, Matteo. Aldino retrieved my duffel bags from the trunk. This is Sienna. She'll be staying in the East Wing. Make sure everyone knows she's under my protection. Mateo's eyes cut to me, sharp and assessing, then back to Aldino. Understood. The difference hit me immediately. Raphael had gripped my shoulder like I was property he was loaning out. These men looked at Aldino and saw someone they'd chosen to follow, someone who'd earned their loyalty through something more than fear. It was the first time since meeting him that I considered the possibility he might actually be different. Aldino led me through double doors into an entry hall that made my throat tight. Marble floors, a chandelier that probably required a ladder to clean, a curved staircase that belonged in a museum. Everything was cream and gold and perfectly, impossibly clean. You're staring, Aldino observed. I've never been in a house that had a name before. It doesn't have a name. Places like this always have names. Like Villa something or Casa, whatever. His laugh was sudden and genuine, the sound softening the hard edges of his face. Casa whatever. I like that. He started up the stairs, and I followed, my footsteps silent against the runner. Though if we're being accurate, it's called Esperanza. Hope. That's almost aggressively ironic. My mother named it. His voice shifted slightly, something careful entering his tone. Before she understood what kind of man my father was, I didn't ask. The past tense was answer enough. The East Wing was less museum, more livable, still expensive, but with furniture that looked like it was meant for sitting rather than admiring. Aldino pushed open a door to reveal a bedroom roughly the size of my last 3 apartments combined. King bed with white linens, sitting area with a view of the gardens, an attached bathroom I could see through an open door. This is yours, he said, setting my bags on the bench at the foot of the bed. Lock works from the inside only, no cameras in the private quarters. Rosa handles housekeeping, but she won't enter without permission. I turned in a slow circle, trying to process the concept of owning this much space. Where's your room? Other end of the hall. He leaned against the door frame, hands in his pockets, watching me with that same intensity that had pinned me at table 1. You'll be safe here, Sienna. I meant what I said. Why do you keep calling me that? You know it's not my real name. Because you're not ready to give me the real one yet. He pushed off the frame. When you are, I'll use it. He moved toward the door, and panic flared unexpectedly in my chest. Wait. He stopped. I don't understand this, I admitted, the words tumbling out. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why go this far for someone you met 6 hours ago? Aldino was quiet for a long moment, his profile sharp against the hallway light. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been honesty, because when you whispered mi corazon, you weren't looking at the tattoos or the reputation or the things I've done. You were looking at whoever you saw in your memory. He turned his head slightly, meeting my eyes. And I want to know what it feels like when someone sees me that way on purpose. The confession hung between us like a bridge. 1 month, I whispered. 1 month, he agreed. Aldino offers her safety when the law wouldn't, when the system that was supposed to protect her instead became her prison. If you're tired of a world that fails the innocent while protecting the corrupt, smash that like button. Let's show them we see the truth, because sometimes the monsters wear badges, and sometimes the criminals are the only ones offering real justice. He left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood in the center of that enormous room, surrounded by luxury I'd never earned, and protection I didn't deserve, and for the first time in a year, I locked a door knowing that the monster on the other side was the one keeping me safe. Not hunting me. I sat on the edge of the bed, impossibly soft, nothing like the motel mattress or the floor pallet I'd been sleeping on, and let myself breathe. 1 month. 30 days to figure out who Aldino Soto really was beneath the ink and the reputation. 30 days to decide if safety was worth the price of staying in a criminal's world. 30 days before I had to choose between running again or planting roots in the most dangerous soil I'd ever touched. I looked at my hands, musician's hands, scarred and calloused. Hands that had once played Dvorak for audiences in evening gowns and now poured whiskey for men who solved problems with violence. And I realized, with something that felt dangerously close to hope, that maybe those hands could do both. Maybe I could be both. Maybe I didn't have to choose between the woman I was and the woman I'd become. I just had to survive long enough to find out. Aldino offers her safety when the law wouldn't. If you're tired of a system that fails the innocent while protecting the corrupt, smash that like button. Let's show them we see the truth. I lasted 3 days before curiosity won. 3 days of waking up in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. Eating meals Rosa left on warming trays, real food. not vending machine dinners and walking the grounds of an estate that still didn't feel real. 3 days of watching Aldino disappear into his office for hours at a time, emerging only for dinners we ate in careful silence, two strangers orbiting each other like planets afraid of collision. The gallery job was legitimate, exactly as he'd promised. He'd given me keys, access codes, and a portfolio of artists waiting for representation. I spent my days in a converted carriage house, reviewing submissions, my nights wondering what exactly Aldino did in that office and whether I wanted to know the answer. On the 4th morning, I found him in the garden. He was shirtless. I'd come downstairs early, restless from another night of sleeping too well, and followed the sound of movement through the French doors that opened onto the south terrace. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting everything gold, and there he was moving through what looked like a martial arts form, his body flowing from stance to stance, with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. But it was the ink that stopped me cold. I'd seen the tattoos on his neck, caught glimpses of them disappearing beneath his collar. But this was a complete canvas. They covered his chest, his ribs, his back, wrapping around his torso like a second skin. Religious imagery tangled with something darker, saints and demons, scripture and serpents, roses growing through rib cages, a woman's face over his heart with tears that dripped down to his stomach. He moved through a final sequence and stilled, his breathing controlled despite the sheen of sweat on his skin. Then, without turning around, he said, "You're staring again. I should have apologized. Should have retreated back inside and pretended I'd never seen this." Instead, I stepped onto the terrace, my bare feet cold against the stone. "They tell a story," I said quietly. "Most tattoos do." He grabbed a towel from the bench, wiping his face but not bothering to cover himself. "You want to know what mine says? Only if you want to tell me." He studied me for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes, a decision being made, a wall being lowered. "Come here." I crossed the terrace slowly, stopping just close enough that I could see the details. Up close, the work was even more intricate, every line crisp, every shadow deliberate. This wasn't prison ink or teenage rebellion. This was art. This one, he touched the woman's face over his heart, is my mother. She died when I was 16. Overdose. His finger traced down to the serpent coiled around his ribs. "This is my father. He's the one who gave her the drugs." My breath caught. "He ran the cartel before me," Aldino continued, his voice flat in the way of someone reciting facts they'd made peace with. "But he was sloppy. Cruel. He used fear because he had nothing else. When I was 23, I killed him." He said it like he was telling me about the weather. No pride, no shame, just fact. "The saints," I whispered, gesturing to the religious figures scattered across his chest. "Why mix them with—" I gestured vaguely at the demons, the violence, the darkness. "Because I am both." He met my eyes. "I go to church every Sunday. I fund schools and hospitals. I make sure my mother's grave always has fresh flowers." His hand moved to the demon on his left shoulder. "And I also do terrible things to terrible people. The ink reminds me that you can't have one without the other. Not in my world." I should have been horrified. Should have been backing toward the door, remembering that this man had just admitted to patricide as casually as someone might admit to changing jobs. Instead, I reached out. My fingers hovered over the rose on his collarbone, not quite touching. "May I?" He nodded, something vulnerable flickering across his face. I traced the petals. They were warmer than I expected, his skin fever-hot beneath my fingertips. The thorns wrapped down around his shoulder, and I followed them, feeling him go very still beneath my touch. "You're not afraid of me," he said quietly. "Not a question, an observation. I've learned that the scariest monsters don't advertise." My hand fell away. "They wear badges and expensive suits, and use the law as a weapon." His eyes sharpened. "Tell me." "I can't." "Sienna." He caught my wrist gently, the same way he had at table 1. "You've seen my scars. Show me yours." The sun was fully up now, bathing the garden in morning light that made everything feel too exposed. But maybe that was the point. Maybe secrets only survived in darkness. "My real name is Thelma," I heard myself say. "Thelma Emmett. I was a cellist. Philadelphia Orchestra, second chair." His grip on my wrist loosened but didn't release. There was a case. High-profile corruption trial, city officials, police officers, people who thought they were untouchable. I was supposed to perform at a fundraiser, but I got the date wrong and showed up a day early. My throat tightened. I walked in on the lead detective taking a payoff from one of the defendants. Aldino's jaw tightened. Vance. I blinked. How did you? I make it my business to know who the corrupt cops are in every city I operate in. His voice had gone cold. Detective Marcus Vance. Decorated officer. Spotless record. And a complete sociopath. He was so calm when he saw me, I whispered, the memory clawing its way up my throat. He smiled and told me I must have been mistaken about what I saw, told me to go home and forget about it. I pulled my hand free, wrapping my arms around myself. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my apartment with flowers and asked me to dinner. And when you said no, he didn't accept it. The words came faster now, a dam breaking. He started showing up everywhere. My rehearsals, the coffee shop I went to. He'd just stand there, watching, smiling. When I reported it, his captain said I was clearly mistaken, that Detective Vance was simply being thorough about ensuring witness safety. Aldino's hands curled into fists. He used his position. He used everything. My bank account started getting flagged. Random audits, traffic stops where I'd done nothing wrong. He was building a case against me, fabricating evidence, turning my life into a prison. My voice cracked. And then he came to my apartment one night and told me he could make it all go away, that he just wanted to take care of me, that if I'd just give him a chance. How did you get away? I ran. Middle of the night, took nothing but cash and fake IDs a friend helped me get. I've been running for almost a year. I looked up at him, and every time I think I'm safe, I see a police car, and I want to vomit, because the system that's supposed to protect people is the thing hunting me. Aldino was quiet for a long moment, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and deadly. Does he know where you are? I don't think so. I've been careful. That's not what I asked. He stepped closer, his presence filling my vision. Does Detective Marcus Vance know you're in this city? I don't know. Maybe. He has resources I can't. He won't touch you. Aldino's hand came up, cupping my jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd just told me about himself. I promise you, Thelma. He will never touch you again. Hearing my real name in his voice did something to me. Cracked something open that I'd kept sealed shut for months. You can't fight the police, I whispered. You can't fight the entire system. Watch me. His thumb traced my cheekbone. I've been fighting systems my entire life. And I'm very good at it. Aldino, you gave me 1 month, he said quietly. Give me permission to use it. I should have asked what that meant. Should have demanded details, limits, boundaries. But I was so tired of being hunted, so tired of looking over my shoulder and sleeping with my shoes on and using names that didn't belong to me. Permission to do what? His smile was dark and promising. To be the monster you need. And God help me, I nodded. Because maybe it took a demon to fight the devils wearing badges. Maybe it took someone who understood violence to stand against someone who'd weaponized law. Maybe the only way to survive the system was to find someone who existed outside it entirely. 1 month, I breathed. 1 month, he agreed. But we both knew that Detective Marcus Vance's time had just started counting down. And Aldino Soto never broke a promise. Vance is a predator with a badge. If you can't stand men who think they own women, comment, I stand for respect. If you don't comment, you're siding with the bully. Aldino didn't sleep that night. I knew because I could hear him moving through the house, footsteps in the hallway, low voices from his office, the sound of cars arriving and leaving at irregular intervals. I lay in my enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of war I'd just started, and whether I'd survive seeing the end of it. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs. The house was different in the dark. The grand spaces that felt luxurious by day took on a different quality at night, shadows pooling in corners, the gleam of marble looking cold rather than elegant. Light spilled from under Aldino's office door, and I could hear voices inside. Spanish, mostly. Too rapid for me to follow with my limited understanding. I stood outside for a long moment, my hand hovering over the door handle. Before I could knock, it opened. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Behind him, I could see Aldino's office properly for the first time, a massive desk covered in papers and laptops, screens showing what looked like security footage, and 3 other men I didn't recognize standing around a table covered in documents. She should hear this, Marco said, looking back at Aldino. Aldino glanced up from whatever he was reading. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd been awake as long as I had. It's 3 in the morning. She's not sleeping either, Marco pointed out. Aldino's eyes met mine across the room, and something passed between us, an understanding that we were both too deep into this now to pretend otherwise. He gestured me in. I stepped past Marco into the office, suddenly aware that I was wearing pajama pants and one of the shirts Rosa had left in my closet. The other men glanced at me with varying degrees of curiosity, but none of them looked surprised, like they'd already been briefed on who I was and why I mattered. Thelma, this is Diego, Luis, and Santos, Aldino said, pointing to each man in turn. My security team. Gentlemen, this is Thelma Emmett, the woman we're protecting. Ma'am, Diego nodded, his silver-streaked hair catching the light. We've been gathering information on Detective Vance, Aldino continued, picking up a folder and flipping it open. Married, 2 kids, house in the suburbs, spotless record, 38 commendations. Not a single complaint filed against him that stuck. On paper, he's a model officer. And off paper? I asked quietly. Off paper, he's a sociopath with a badge. Luis Younger, tattooed, built like he could break a man in half, tapped one of the screens. We pulled his financials. He's living well above his salary. Very well. Offshore accounts, cash deposits that don't match his legitimate income. He's dirty, I whispered. Very, Aldino agreed. Which means he's vulnerable. Men like him always are. They think they're untouchable right up until someone touches them. He closed the folder. The question is how to proceed. You bait him, I said. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. He wants me, I continued, the words coming faster as the idea crystallized. He's been chasing me for a year, so you give him what he wants. You offer me up as bait, set a meeting somewhere public enough that he thinks he's safe, and then, I gestured vaguely, not quite sure what came after and then, but certain they'd figure it out. No, Aldino's voice cut through the room like a blade. It's the fastest way. No. He set the folder down with deliberate control. I am not using you as bait. That's not how this works. But, everyone out. Aldino didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. Marco, Diego, Luis, and Santos filed out without question, the door clicking shut behind them. Suddenly, the office felt much smaller, the air between us charged with something I couldn't name. Aldino moved around the desk, his eyes locked on mine. You were going to sacrifice yourself to protect me from Vance. That's why you were packing. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. You didn't think I could handle a corrupt cop. He stepped closer. You thought you needed to run, to draw him away from me, to protect me from the consequences of helping you. He has the entire police force. And you have me. His hands came up to grip my shoulders. Not hard, but firm enough to keep me still. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand that I don't need protecting from men like Vance? That I've been dealing with men like him since before you learned to read music? I just didn't want you to get hurt because of me, I whispered. Something in his expression cracked. Thelma. He pulled me closer, his forehead dropping to rest against mine. You incredible, infuriating woman. I am touched that you tried to protect me, and I am furious that you thought you had to. I don't understand the difference. The difference is that you matter more than my safety. The difference is that I would burn down every police station between here and Philadelphia if it meant keeping you safe. His hand slid from my shoulders to cup my face. So no, you are not bait. You are not a bargaining chip. You are the thing I'm protecting, not the thing I risk. My throat tightened. Then what's your plan? My plan, he said quietly, is to give him exactly what he thinks he wants. He released me and moved to the desk, picking up my old phone, the one that Vance had been messaging. His fingers moved across the screen with surprising dexterity, typing something I couldn't see. What are you doing? Replying. He held up the phone so I could read the screen. You win. I'm tired of running. Let's meet. But just backup, no wires. If I see another cop, I disappear forever. My breath caught. He'll never agree to that. He will. Aldino set the phone down. Because men like Vance think they're smarter than everyone else. He'll think he's finally won, that he's broken you, that you're coming to him on your knees. His ego won't let him resist. And when he shows up, Aldino's smile was dark and terrible. Then he learns what happens when you hunt what's mine. The phone buzzed. We both looked down. Thelma. Finally, tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Riverside Park, north entrance. Come alone. We'll talk this through like adults. He took the bait. I breathed. Of course he did. Aldino forwarded the message to someone, probably Marco, then powered the phone off. Now we prepare. For what? For war. He moved toward the door, already pulling his phone out. Marco, get everyone back in here. We have 20 hours. The next day passed in a blur of preparation that looked nothing like I'd imagined. Men arrived and left with military precision, carrying cases I didn't want to examine too closely. Aldino spent hours in his office with Marco and the others, their voices low and serious. I caught fragments of conversation exit routes, surveillance positions, contingencies. At sunset, Aldino found me in the garden, where I'd been pretending to read. It's time, he said simply. I followed him back to the house, through corridors I was still learning, to a room I'd never seen before. He opened the door and gestured me inside. It was an armory. Guns lined one wall, handguns, rifles, things I didn't have names for. Tactical vests hung on hooks. Combat gear laid out with the precision of someone who'd done this before. Many times before. Aldino moved to a cabinet and began pulling items out systematically. The expensive suits were gone, replaced by black tactical pants, a fitted shirt, a vest with plates I realized with a jolt were bulletproof. He strapped a holster to his thigh, checked a weapon with practiced efficiency, and slid it home. You're really doing this, I whispered. Did you think I wouldn't? He pulled on a jacket still black, still fitted, but clearly designed for function over fashion. Did you think I'd send my men to handle this while I stayed home? I didn't know what I'd thought. He crossed to me, this version of him somehow more dangerous than the man in the white dress shirt at table 1. This was Aldino Soto without the veneer of civility, without the pretense that he was anything other than what he was. I need you to stay here, he said, his hands coming up to frame my face one more time. Rosa will be with you. Diego stays as well. He's under orders to get you out if anything goes wrong. What could go wrong? Nothing. His thumb traced my cheekbone. But I plan for everything. Aldino. Say it, he interrupted. Say what you called me that first night. My breath caught. Mi corazon. His eyes closed briefly, like the words had hit him physically. When they opened, they burned. When I come back, we're going to talk about what that means, about what this is between us. And if you don't come back, I always come back. He leaned in, his lips brushing my forehead in something that felt like a promise. But if I don't, everything in this house is yours. Marco has instructions. I don't want your house. I know. He smiled, sad and soft. You'd give it all away and go back to running. But humor me anyway. He released me and turned toward the door, where Marco waited with the others. They were all dressed similarly, black tactical gear, weapons visible, expressions set in grim determination. Let's go hunting, Aldino said, and they disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with my fear and the terrible knowledge that I'd just sent the first man who'd made me feel safe in a year to face the monster who'd destroyed my life. All I could do was wait, and pray that when Aldino came back, he came back whole. I wasn't supposed to be there. Diego had explicit orders to keep me at the estate, to lock the doors if necessary, to physically restrain me if I tried to leave. But Rosa, sweet, grandmother Rosa, who left me breakfast and changed my sheets, took one look at my face and handed me her car keys. Some things, she said in accented English, a woman needs to see for herself. So I drove. Alone. Following the route Marco had accidentally left open on one of the office computers. Riverside Park, north entrance, 9 p.m. I arrived at 8:45 and parked 3 blocks away, approaching on foot through the tree line that bordered the park. The November air bit through my jacket, my breath forming clouds that dissipated into darkness. The park was empty, too cold for joggers, too late for families, just shadows and the distant sound of the river. I found a position behind a maintenance shed with a clear view of the north entrance and waited. Vance arrived at 8:55. I recognized him immediately despite the year that had passed. Same expensive overcoat, same confident stride, same face that had smiled at me while destroying my life. He was alone, hands in his pockets, moving like a man who'd never had to worry about his own safety because the badge in his wallet was better than body armor. He stopped at a bench near the entrance, checking his watch. Waiting for me. For Thelma. For the woman he'd spent a year hunting, convinced she'd finally broken. At exactly 9 p.m., Aldino stepped out of the shadows. Vance turned, his hand already moving toward his weapon before he registered that the figure approaching wasn't a terrified cellist in a yellow dress. His eyes widened fractionally as Aldino moved into the lamplight, 6 feet of muscle and ink wrapped in tactical gear, flanked by Marco and Luis, who materialized from different directions like wolves closing a trap. Who the fuck Vance's hand was on his gun now, but he hadn't drawn it, training warring with confusion. Detective Marcus Vance. Aldino's voice carried across the empty park, calm and cold. I believe you've been looking for someone who belongs to me. Vance's face hardened. I don't know who you think you are, but you're interfering with police business. Walk away now before this becomes a problem. Oh, it's already a problem. Aldino stopped 10 feet away, his hands loose at his sides. The problem is that you've been using your badge to stalk a civilian across state lines. The problem is that you've been manufacturing evidence and abusing your authority. The problem is that you thought you could terrorize Thelma Emmett without consequences. At my name, Vance's expression shifted calculation, replacing confusion. So she ran to you. A criminal. He actually laughed. That's perfect. When I bring her in, I can add aiding and abetting to the charges. You're not bringing her anywhere, Marco said quietly from Vance's left. And there are no charges, Luis added from his right. Vance's hand tightened on his weapon. I'm a decorated police detective. You really want to threaten an officer of the law? You're a predator with a badge, Aldino corrected. And I don't threaten. I educate. He nodded once. Luis moved with practiced efficiency, producing a tablet that glowed blue in the darkness. He held it up so Vance could see the screen. That's your house, Aldino said conversationally. Nice place. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, probably worth about $400,000. Interesting that you could afford it on a detective's salary. Vance's face paled slightly. I have family money. You don't. Marco pulled out his own phone, reading from it like he was reciting a grocery list. Parents deceased, no inheritance. Wife works part-time as a teacher's aide. Your legitimate income wouldn't cover the mortgage, let alone the car, the boat, the timeshare in Cabo. Those are private. Those are the proceeds of corruption, Aldino interrupted. Offshore accounts totaling $2.3 million. Cash deposits that coincide with case dismissals and evidence that mysteriously disappeared. You've been dirty for at least 8 years, detective. Probably longer. Vance drew his weapon. I don't know what you think you've found, but I have immunity. From the law, yes. Aldino hadn't moved, hadn't even flinched when the gun came out. But I'm not the law. I'm something much worse for men like you. I'm accountability. You're a criminal, Vance spat. A thug with delusions of, I'm honest about what I am. Aldino cut him off. You hide behind a badge and pretend your obsession is duty. You destroy innocent lives and call it justice. Tell me, detective, which one of us is really the monster? Vance's gun hand was shaking now, rage and fear warring across his features. She's mine. I saw her first. I could have protected her, given her everything, but she ran like a... She's not property. Aldino's voice dropped to something lethal. She's not yours. She never was. And the fact that you think you own her because you decided to is exactly why you're dangerous. I'm a decorated officer. You're a stalker. Marco moved closer. You used police databases to track her movements. You froze her bank accounts without probable cause. You manufactured evidence to frame an innocent woman because she rejected you. That's not... Vance swung the gun toward Marco. Aldino moved. I barely saw it happen. One moment, Vance had a weapon aimed at Marco. The next, Aldino had closed the distance, his hand clamping around Vance's wrist with enough force that I heard bones crack from 30 yards away. The gun clattered to the pavement. Vance screamed. Every message you sent her, Aldino said, his voice terrifyingly calm as he twisted Vance's arm behind his back. Every time you made her look over her shoulder. Every night she couldn't sleep because she knew you were hunting her. I want you to think about all of that right now. You can't, Vance gasped. You can't do this. I'm a cop. There will be investigations, consequences. For you, maybe. Aldino forced him to his knees. Marco, show him what we found. Marco held up the tablet again, swiping through images. These are the other women. 5 of them over the past decade. All had restraining orders against you that mysteriously disappeared. All suddenly moved away or stopped pressing charges. Want to guess why? Vance's face went white. You threatened them, Aldino continued. Used your position to make their lives hell until they were too scared to fight back. You're not a detective, Vance. You're a predator who found a way to hunt with legal immunity. The system protected you, Luis added. Your captain, your union, the thin blue line that looks the other way when one of their own is a monster. But we're not the system. Aldino handled the monster that the system protected, the predator who used a badge as a hunting license, who destroyed lives and called it love. If you believe in justice, real justice, no matter how it's served, hit subscribe. Because sometimes the only way to stop a villain is to become the thing they fear. Don't let the monsters win. What are you going to do? Vance whispered, his voice cracking. I'm going to give you 2 options, Aldino said quietly. Option 1. I let you walk away. Right now. But first, you submit your resignation, citing personal reasons. You liquidate those offshore accounts and distribute the money to your victims. You disappear to somewhere very far away and never speak Thelma Emmett's name again. And option 2? Aldino leaned in close, his voice dropping to something I couldn't hear from my hiding place. But I saw Vance's face drain of all color. Saw his body start to shake. Option 1, Vance gasped. I'll take option 1. Smart. Aldino released him, stepping back. Marco has a resignation letter already drafted. You'll sign it. Tonight. And then you'll get in your car and drive until you hit an ocean. My family will be told you took a job overseas. They'll be financially secure. I'll see to that, because they don't deserve to suffer for your sins. But you? Aldino crouched down to Vance's level. You get to spend the rest of your life knowing that if you ever come near Thelma again, if I even hear her name from your lips, option 2 becomes permanent. Do we understand each other? Vance nodded frantically. Good. Aldino stood. Luis, make sure the detective signs his paperwork. Marco, send everything we found to the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. Anonymously, let them clean their own house. And if he doesn't leave? Marco asked. Then we implement option 2, Aldino said simply. And no one will ever find the body. I watched from the shadows as they forced Vance to sign documents. Watched him stumble toward his car like a broken man. Watched him drive away into a darkness that would swallow him whole. Aldino stood in the empty park for a long moment after the taillights disappeared, his shoulders tight with tension that was only now beginning to release. She's here, Marco said quietly. Has been the whole time. Aldino's head turned toward my hiding place. I know. My breath caught. Rosa? He called out. Rosa. Marco confirmed. Aldino shook his head, something that might have been amusement flickering across his face. Remind me to give her a raise. You can come out now, Thelma, he said, his voice carrying across the park. It's over. I stepped out from behind the shed, my legs shaking, my heart hammering against my ribs. Aldino met me halfway, his hands coming up to cup my face. You weren't supposed to see that, he said softly. I needed to. My voice cracked. I needed to see him broken the way he broke me. Is that what you saw? I looked into his eyes, dark and infinite and searching. I saw the man who promised to protect me keep his promise. I saw justice when the law couldn't provide it. I saw, my breath hitched. I saw someone fight for me when no one else would. His forehead dropped to rest against mine. He's gone, Thelma. He'll never touch you again. You're free. Free. The word hung in the cold air between us, and for the first time in a year, I believed it. Aldino handled the monster that the system protected. If you believe in justice no matter how it's served, hit subscribe. Don't let the villains win. The cello arrived 3 weeks after Vance disappeared. I came downstairs one morning to find it waiting in the music room, a space I hadn't even known existed, until Rosa opened the double doors and gestured inside with a knowing smile. The room was all windows and light, acoustically perfect, with built-in shelves holding vinyl records and a sound system that probably cost more than my entire education. But it was the cello that stopped my heart. Not just any cello. My cello. The one I'd been forced to leave behind when I ran. The one I'd assumed was lost forever, or sold to cover the debts Vance had manufactured against me. How I turned to find Aldino leaning in the doorway, dressed in a simple white shirt and dark pants, his tattoos visible at his throat and wrists. I made some calls, he said simply. Had it retrieved from storage. The bow needed new hair, and I had a luthier tune it, but otherwise it's exactly as you left it. I crossed the room slowly, my fingers trembling as I touched the wood. It was warm, like it had been waiting for me, like it had known I'd come back. You didn't have to do this, I whispered. Yes, I did. He pushed off the door frame, moving into the room. You've been walking around like a ghost of yourself. I wanted to give you back a piece of who you were before Vance tried to erase you. I lifted the cello from its stand, settling it between my knees with a familiarity that felt like coming home. The bow fit in my hand perfectly, muscle memory taking over before my conscious mind had even registered the movement. Play something, Aldino said quietly. I should have been nervous. Should have worried that a year away from performance would have dulled my skills, that my fingers would stumble over passages I used to know by heart. But the moment bow touched string, everything else fell away. I played Dvořák. The piece I'd been rehearsing the night before, everything fell apart. The same melody that had been playing in the lounge the night I'd whispered, "Mi Corazon," without thinking. The notes poured out of me, not perfect, a little rough from disuse, but real, honest, mine. When I finished, my eyes were wet. Aldino hadn't moved from his position against the wall, but something in his expression had softened. "You're extraordinary," he said simply. "And he tried to take that from you, but he didn't." I set the bow aside carefully. "Because you gave it back." "I didn't give you anything. I just removed the obstacle." He crossed to where I sat, crouching down so we were eye level. "The music was always yours, Thelma. The talent, the passion, the way you make that instrument sing, that's all you. I just made sure you were safe enough to remember it." The month was up tomorrow. 30 days that had somehow become the most stable, the most terrifying, the most real period of my entire year in hiding. We'd never discussed what would happen when the deal expired. Never acknowledged that the arbitrary timeline he'd given me was approaching its end. "I need to tell you something," I said quietly. His expression grew cautious. "All right. That first night, at the lounge, when I called you Mi Corazon, I wasn't thinking about you. I was lost in a memory of Barcelona, of an old guitarist who'd shown me kindness when I was young and stupid, and thought the world was full of people like that." "I know," Aldino said. I blinked. "You know, you weren't looking at me when you said it. You were looking through me, at something that existed only in your head." His hand came up, fingers ghosting along my jaw. "That's what made it so devastating. Because I want to be someone you see that way when you're present, when you mean it." My breath caught. "Aldino, the month is up tomorrow," he continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "And I promised you could leave if you wanted. That promise stands. Rosa will pack your things. Diego will drive you anywhere you want to go, and I will make sure you have enough money to start fresh somewhere safe. Is that what you want?" "What I want," he said carefully, "is for you to choose to stay. Not because you're grateful, not because you're still scared, but because you want to be here. With me, in this life." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "But I won't trap you the way Vance did. I won't use my resources or my feelings to cage you. So if you want to leave, I'll let you go." I set the cello aside carefully, then reached up to cup his face the way he was cupping mine. My fingers found the tattoos on his neck, the serpent, the saint, the demon, all the contradiction that made him exactly who he was. "Do you know what Mi Corazon actually means?" I asked softly. "My heart, yes. But in Spanish, when you call someone that, you're not describing them. You're claiming them. You're saying this person is my heart, the thing that keeps me alive, the thing I couldn't survive without." I traced the serpent's coils, feeling his pulse jump beneath my fingers. "The first time I said it to you, I wasn't talking to you at all." His jaw tightened. "I know, but I am now." I leaned in close, my lips nearly brushing his. "Mi Corazon, my heart. The man who gave me back my music, my safety, my ability to sleep without my shoes on. The man who became a monster so I wouldn't have to be afraid of them anymore." "Thelma." "I'm not leaving tomorrow," I interrupted. "I'm not leaving next month, or next year, or any time in the foreseeable future. Because I finally understand what you meant when you said I was yours to protect." I pressed my forehead to his. "You're mine to keep, and I don't give up things that matter." The smile that broke across his face was devastating, all the carefully controlled danger melting into something raw and real, and so achingly hopeful it made my chest hurt. "Say it again," he whispered, echoing the command he'd given me that first night. "Mi Corazon." I said it slowly, deliberately, letting each syllable carry the weight of everything I meant. "My heart, my home, my choice." He kissed me then, soft and careful, like I was something precious that might shatter. His hands tangled in my hair, mine slid around his neck, and for a moment the entire world condensed down to this. The two of us, the music room filled with morning light, and the knowledge that I'd finally stopped running. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, Aldino rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he said simply. "I have since the moment you looked at me like I was human instead of a headline. I love you too." The words came easier than I expected. "Even though you're terrifying and dangerous and probably going to give me a heart attack one day with the things you do, I'll try to be less terrifying. Don't you dare." I pulled back enough to look at him properly. I didn't fall in love with a safe man. I fell in love with the one who became dangerous for me, who looked at a corrupt system and decided to go to war because someone needed to. His smile turned sharp. I can work with that. We stayed in the music room for hours after that. I played while he listened, working through pieces I hadn't touched in a year, relearning the feel of the instrument against my body. Sometimes he asked questions about the composers, the techniques, the stories behind the music. Sometimes he just watched, his dark eyes tracking my movements like he was memorizing every detail. When the light started to fade, turning the room gold and orange, I set the cello aside and moved to where he sat on the piano bench. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me." I settled beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. Not the ghost I'd become, not the victim Vance tried to make me. You saw the musician, the survivor, the woman who was strong enough to whisper an endearment to a cartel boss, and then run 3 blocks in heels. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. That was impressive. It was terrified. It was both. He took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "And for the record, I didn't save you, Thelma. You saved yourself. You're the one who ran, who survived, who built a life from nothing, while being hunted by a man with unlimited resources. I just removed the final obstacle. You did more than that." I squeezed his hand. "You gave me a reason to stop running, to plant roots, to believe I could be Thelma Emmett again instead of just another fake name in a long line of people I've pretended to be. You're always Thelma to me," he said quietly. "Even when you were Sienna in that yellow dress, terrified and shaking, but still brave enough to serve my table. I saw you then, and I see you now, and I will keep seeing you for as long as you let me." I leaned my head on his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the room in shades of amber and rose. Outside, I could hear the fountain in the garden, the distant sound of Marco's voice as he checked the perimeter, the ordinary sounds of a life I was finally allowed to live. "The yellow dress," I said after a moment. "Do you still have it?" "Rosa saved it." "Why?" "Because I want to wear it again." I lifted my head to look at him. "But this time, I want to wear it as your partner, not your hostess, not someone serving you, your equal." His eyes darkened with something that looked like desire and respect tangled together. "Are you asking me on a date, Thelma Emmett?" "I'm telling you we're going on one." I smiled. "Somewhere expensive where you have to wear a suit and I get to look beautiful on your arm. Somewhere everyone can see that the cellist and the cartel boss chose each other. That might cause talk. Let them talk." I reached up, tracing the tattoo on his neck one more time, the serpent that represented his father, the saint that represented his hope. All the contradiction that made him mine. I'm done hiding who I am and who I love. If the world has a problem with it, the world can take it up with my very protective, very dangerous boyfriend. "Boyfriend," he repeated, tasting the word. "I like that. Good. Because you're stuck with it." I kissed him again, soft and sure. "You and your tattoos and your men and your estate with no name except hope. All of it. I choose all of it. And I choose you," he murmured against my lips. The musician with calloused fingers and a spine of steel who accidentally called me mi Corazon and changed my entire world. We sat there as darkness fell completely, the music room transforming from gold to shadow. Somewhere in the house, Rosa was probably cooking dinner. Marco was running his security checks. The ordinary rhythms of a life that was somehow mine now continued around us. I'd spent a year running from monsters. I'd found my home in the arms of one, and I'd never been safer in my life. "Play something else," Aldino said eventually, his voice soft in the darkness. So I did. I picked up the cello and played into the night, not Dvorak this time, but something new, something improvised, something that sounded like freedom and choice and love that came from the most unexpected places. And Aldino listened, his dark eyes never leaving mine. Both of us finally understanding what it meant to be seen, to be chosen, to be home. Mi Corazon. My heart, not the ghost of a memory, but the man sitting in front of me, the one who'd given me back my name, my music, and my life, the one I'd keep for as long as he'd have me, forever, if I was lucky. And based on the way he was looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered, I was going to be very lucky indeed.